Hi, everyone. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer. Today's legal live stream show showcases another YouTuber. His name is Eric Cervone, and he created a video recently entitled Why Law School is the Worst Decision You'll Ever Make. So that video has gotten thousands and thousands of views, and that's also how I first found out about his YouTube channel. And he has graciously agreed to be a guest on this show to answer your questions. So let's bring Eric to the stream. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Judy. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing just fine. And again, thank you so much for your time since you and I don't really know each other. And, you being so generous with your time and being willing to come up here.
No, of course. I mean, I spend hours preparing all of my interview videos, and I spend about half an hour preparing this why you shouldn't go to law school rant. And that's been one of my best performing videos. So now I'm just the anti-law school guy. So I'm happy to be here now under my new expertise.
Yeah. And do you think you're going to do any more law school related videos for your channel?
It apparently has struck a nerve. So I don't know. I don't really have anything else in mind. That's really not, the focus of what I do, but it seems like people really were interested in it for some reason or another. So maybe some point down the line, it's not really my focus.
Okay. Yeah. And so your channel name is just your name, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I do my podcast, Honest Offense. And
Okay.
I put the episodes up on that YouTube channel, youtube.com/Eric Cervone.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, tell me more about your background, like where you grew up and what kind of
Sure.
family you came from, how you wound up going to law school.
Sure. I grew up in Pittsburgh. My family originated in Italy. We came here about 100 years ago. So my parents were both from Philly, moved out to Pittsburgh when I was a kid, and that's really where I grew up. I went to Pitt for undergrad, so I stayed. I'm through and through Pittsburgh fan, stayed there till I was graduated college, really, and then went to law school. I went to law school really for the same reason that a lot of people go to law school, which was I was graduating college. It was a recession. I didn't know what else to do. I took the LSAT. I did pretty well. And I said, okay, this lets me delay growing up for another 3 years and having to make any kind of real decisions in my life. So I got lucky. I got a good scholarship to a good school. And so I did that for the next 3 years and then delayed again, making a decision by doing an LLM. So I'm very good at putting things off. That's my expertise.
Yeah. Well, so did you go straight kindergarten through JD then and
Yeah,
LLM?
it's weird to I there was a break between the JD and the LLM, but it is weird to think like, yeah, I was in school from age 5 until 26, I guess, when I graduated law school. That's a weird thing, especially because I hated school. I was, in high school, I was in detention every other day. So I was not a good student from the perspective of my teachers, that's for sure.
Mhm. I see. Yeah, but somehow, you got into college and then got a scholarship, you said, to Notre Dame. Um, how did you decide on Notre Dame?
Yeah, I was very good at standardized tests. So like my GPA was always kind of middling, but I did well on the LSAT. I did well on the SATs, that sort of thing. And when I was looking at law schools, I basically said I was smart enough to say I don't want to go into a lot of debt because I already saw the numbers of the kind of debt people would graduate law school with, and I knew I didn't want to be tied down by debt. So I said I'm going to go to the best school that gives me a good scholarship, and that really just ended up being Notre Dame. So, and look, I have a lot of criticism of the legal profession of law schools. Notre Dame was as good of a school as good of an experience as I could have had. So I don't have, my criticisms aren't specific towards Notre Dame whatsoever. I had incredible professors, great classmates. And so if you have to go to law school, that's not a bad one to go to.
Yeah, and was there anybody else in your extended family that went into law?
I have an uncle who's a lawyer, but other than that, no, not really any direct legal knowledge or background. It was just, again, the default for a lot of people is, if you're relatively smart, if you're a relatively good student and you're not good at math or science, then that's law school's the default, especially I think for if you come from an immigrant family or a relatively new family, they want you to be, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. And I knew it wasn't going to be a doctor, knew it wasn't going to be an engineer because I got C's and D's in those kind of classes. And so my default, I was good in English. I was good in social sciences. The default was law school.
I see. Well, did you talk to your uncle about the legal profession before you went to law school?
I did. And I even sat in on a few law school classes when I was in undergrad. I went to the Pitt Law School, sat in on some classes, and I really enjoyed the intellectual aspect of the law 100%. I enjoyed the intellectual and the philosophical aspects and the background that goes into that. So I I I thought that there would be aspects of it that I would enjoy, and those were the aspects that I did enjoy when I got into it.
Mm, I see. Okay. So, tell us more about Notre Dame. Did you get a full ride scholarship or a partial
Yeah,
scholarship?
it wasn't a full ride. It was it was, I think, of maybe a half scholarship, maybe more than that, something along those lines.
Mhm. Yeah. And it sounds like you thought it was a pretty good experience, right?
It was, especially because Notre Dame had this really cool program for your second year of law school. And for people who don't know, your second year of law school is really like, that's the hardest year. That's when you're taking the upper level courses. That's when you're involved in extracurriculars. That's when you're planning out your career. Instead of doing all of that, I decided to study abroad in London for the year. Notre Dame had a full year study abroad program. And I said I wanted to get out of the South Bend, Indiana winters. So I went to the tropical island of London, and that was a really, really cool experience. And I loved, one of the best experiences of my life. So I love that Notre Dame gave me that opportunity. And yeah, didn't spend a ton of time. They call it studying abroad. I think most people who've had that experience know that study is used very loosely. I was running an international ping pong league. I spent a lot more time doing that than studying, and got to do a lot of traveling. But that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's great to do that before you start working, but did you end up doing law review or missing out on internships because you were studying abroad?
So again, I got lucky. There was a push to start an international law journal at Notre Dame, and I believe that my 2.0 year was the first year. That was the first edition they published, and so they were looking to sign people up to become editors, and they looked at those of us who were studying abroad as being really good candidates for that. So I literally got roped into it just because I had other friends in London who were doing it, and they're like, "Hey, look, this looks really good on your resume." And so I ended up becoming an editor in the International Law Journal, just out of default, because I said, sure, put my name on it.
See. Yeah. So, when you were in law school, then, what kind of internships or jobs did you do?
Sure. I did my first summer I spent in DC. I was working for a nonprofit in DC. And I thought DC, because I worked in DC for a summer as an undergrad too. And I was really interested in policy. And so I went back doing that my first summer. My second summer, I was actually in Phoenix working for a nonprofit as well. I really thought that the policy, nonprofit, legal aid kind of aspect of law was what I wanted to get into, because I was pretty certain I didn't want to do the big corporate law. I wanted to have some sort of meaning to what I was doing. And so that's kind of what I pursued a lot while I was in school, until I saw the salary that those lawyers make. And I thought maybe that's not the way I want to go.
Yeah, I see. Well, we're already getting some questions here, so we'll kind of jump around a little
Let's
bit if
take
you
them.
don't mind. Yeah, thank you, Tony, for being here. Is there a foolproof way of getting a free ride through any? Well, yes, definitely. If you get a really high LSAT score or you have a really good GPA along with the LSAT score, I think it is possible, especially to the lower ranked schools. What are
Yeah, at
your
least as far as tuition goes. I don't know, he's asking about books and stipends. Yeah, I don't know if schools will cover all of that, but you can absolutely get a free ride. I got a couple full ride offers, I think, to some lower ranked schools, at least for tuition. And there may be need based ways to get books, and I don't think you can do a stipend. I mean, people work while they're in school. That's kind of how they make a little extra money.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's great. I mean, I got no scholarship offers, but perhaps I didn't apply to the schools that might have been more willing to give
But
some
you went to
some
great
stuff.
schools, and that's the decision people have to make, is there's a trade-off between how much debt are you willing to take and what kind of schools do you want to go to. So you can go to a really good school and not get a scholarship, but know that if you want to practice at a big firm, your chances of practicing at a big firm are much, much higher if you go to a top 10 school. And that's all part of the calculation you have to make.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So this is where I guess we're going to speed up your timeline of your life a little bit. Um, well, maybe we could backpedal a little bit. Okay, so
Sure.
you liked law school. Okay, you interned for some public interest nonprofit type places, and then what were you thinking of doing when you were about to graduate from
Yeah.
there?
You know, I kind of realized my third year, I just thought the public interest, just first of all, I just felt like I wasn't making the kind of difference that I thought I would be. You have and so many people come into law school with this idealistic view. And I remember seeing numbers. I forget the exact number. I think it's like 80% of law students. I think it was at Harvard Law School where I saw these numbers. 80% of entering students wanted to work in public interest when they entered law school. And then something like 2% actually do when they graduate. So first of all, there's just not that many jobs in that area. It's extremely low paying. And especially when you're coming out with debt. And I think once you're working in the system long enough, even just for a summer, you kind of realize it's very, very difficult to make the kind of difference that you think you can make when you first go in. And so I ended up taking a job. It was a corporate job when I graduated. I think it was just kind of the default. I think a lot of people at Notre Dame and the other top schools, the jobs that are available are those corporate jobs. And
Yeah.
you kind of take what's given to you.
Yeah, but I'm sure, at the beginning, most people are really excited and happy when they get those like big, high paying corporate jobs, right? I mean, weren't you excited at first?
I mean, it was exciting. It was nice to have a job. I knew pretty early on. I was just like, I know I'm not going to be doing this for very long. I just knew like I didn't fit into that environment. Like I knew from the people that I had gone to school with who were interested in those corporate jobs. I knew from hearing about the people who had worked in those fields. I was just like, this is not for me. This is a good way to make a little bit of money, pay off the little bit of debt that I have. And then finding a way out. So I should have gone into it with a better attitude, I think is the question you're asking. Did you have a good attitude at least going in? No, I did not. And so that might've been a sign that I was going to fail immediately. But that was kind of my mindset. It was just like, there's still, the recession was still kind of going on when I was graduating. So jobs were still, even at good schools, good jobs were still tough to come by. So most people were graduating and just happy to get whatever job they could find.
Yeah, I see. Well, I mean, was that the case for your classmates at Notre Dame, or did it seem like pretty much everybody was able to get a job by graduation?
I know there were a lot of people who were struggling, especially at graduation. I think there were a lot of people who didn't have jobs right away, and that was true throughout the legal industry for a few years. I mean, even schools were. I don't know if Notre Dame did this. I don't remember, but I know some schools were paying students for like what they were calling fellowships, which is basically just giving them a stipend of I don't know what it was, 50,000 a year just to stay at the school, maybe help do some research or something, just to be a bridge for them to find a job. And really good schools were doing this because even at really good schools, people were having trouble finding jobs, which I don't think I think now, and our economy is starting to tank again. So maybe that'll be true again. But at least for the last few years, I think it's been easier to at least find a job if you're graduating from a good school.
I see. Yeah. So are you able to tell us a little bit more about your first job out of law school without giving names or
Yeah.
teachers?
I'll try to be careful. I'll try to put on my lawyer hat. But yeah, it was actually it was an in-house job at a big company, and the company was started by a Notre Dame law alum. So he came to Notre Dame specifically to recruit Notre Dame lawyers, and so I thought, okay, that's at least to me working for a big company. I like the idea of that more so than working at a big law firm, because at least I wouldn't have to be tracking my billable hours by every, tenth of the hour, the way you do at a firm. So again, it was a good job. It was a good opportunity. I wasn't the right person for that career path.
I see. And so during that first job out of law school, were you already thinking about getting an LLM?
No, the LLM came because one of the lawyers that I was working with, he was the only one that liked me, and he kind of knew. He's like, you're not built for this kind of work. He's like, you're not built to be dealing with this kind of bureaucracy and just pushing papers around. He knew that I kind of had more of an entrepreneurial mindset, and so he was. It was lucky that he was a Duke alum, and he was telling me about this LLM that Duke had just started for lawyers who wanted to work with startups, and it was a new program, so they were offering like big discounts on their tuition. And so I thought, I was like, okay, I know I don't want to be at the big company. I know I don't want to be working with these giant clients. And I thought it'd be more fun to work with startups. So I said, okay, this, lets me stay in the legal industry, so I don't feel like I'm wasting my degree. And it gives me this path into working with smaller companies and with entrepreneurs. So I was like, yeah, let's go for it. So I said, I kind of doubled down on that bed of legal education.
Oh, what type of LLM
Oh,
was it
so
then?
there was this era in, this is like, I think probably from 2010 to like even just a couple years ago, law schools realized that they can make a ton of money by creating these LLM programs because they already had the professors, they already had the classes. They basically just had to put a stamp on these programs and call them LLMs. So for people who don't know, LLM is a master of laws. It's like a 1 year specialty in law for people who already have their JDs or people who got a law degree internationally and want to practice in the US. You do an LLM. The most common one is tax. So a lot of tax lawyers have an LLM. Those have been around for a long time. A decade or so ago, schools realized, let's create other LLMs and we can make a bunch of money off of them. And so Duke was creating, and there are these crazy ones like in space law. Like I think it's University of Nebraska had an LLM in space law. Duke had one in they called it law and entrepreneurship. And again, it was for lawyers who wanted to work with startups specifically. So it specialized in certain aspects of corporate law, but also we took courses in the business school. We took courses. We did like internships with local startups and local entrepreneurs. And so it was a cool program. And that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, did you have to take out a loan to do the LLM?
No, because again, I got a big discount tuition. I had some money saved up. So I made a lot of really, really bad decisions as far as my career goes. One of the smart ones was I really worked to minimize the loans because I knew I didn't want to be trapped by loans. So I was always looking for ways to, if I was going to continue my education, to not have to deal with that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, I always thought for an LLM program, it was also a way for people to write another legal paper if they wanted to go into legal
Yeah.
teaching. So did you have to write some sort of big paper, like a dissertation almost for
No,
your
there was no dissertation. I mean,
program?
this was it was a very practical, focused. I'm thinking, no, yeah, there was no dissertation. It was focused on getting a job with a startup, and so there wasn't much like academic focus to it.
So Valentino follows up. So was getting an LLM worth
Yeah, I
it?
mean that's the $1 million question, almost literally. Uh, I don't, I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh, I don't have regrets because I always think that's BS. But um, I think I learned a lot from that experience. Would I do it again? I don't know. It's been helpful to me in some of the stuff that I do now, even though I don't work in law, I don't practice law. It helped me kind of figure out what it was I wanted to do. But what I tell a lot of people is, well, there's ways to figure out what you want to do without spending the time of going to law school and 3 years plus another year if you're talking LLM, all those thousands of dollars. It's not the most efficient way to figure out what you want to do. So it's hard to give a yes or no answer to that question. It's
Yeah.
I don't sit back and think, oh, I wish I had done this differently. I wish I'd done that differently. I did it, and I try to use what I learned from it to help myself going forward.
Okay. Well, just out of curiosity, so did doing the LLM cost pretty much the same in tuition as just regular law school?
I
Like
think it's
a year?
basically about a year of law school, if I remember right. If you were doing it at full cost, it would have been roughly the same of what a year of law school would have been. I believe that's how it worked.
Okay.
I told you before we started recording, I'm starting to get old, and these memories are all kind of running together. So I would tell people to look into it if they're thinking about getting an LLM. And again, just think hard about what it is you want to do. The people who had the most success coming out of law school were the ones who went into it very clear in why they wanted to go to law school, what they wanted to get out of it. And the people who struggled the most were the people like me who were just like, I'm kind of interested in this and I need something to do and I'll figure it out along the way. You often don't figure it out along the way. I think that's just what it is. You go in thinking you'll figure it out, but there's much cheaper ways of figuring it out and much more active ways of figuring it out. It's law school is meant to train you to be a lawyer. So if you're going to figure out something other than how to be a lawyer, law school is not going to help you get there.
Yeah. And I also feel like, at least for people like myself whose families were immigrants, I feel like we didn't know like what is it really like to be a practicing
Right.
attorney. I had no idea how much of a hierarchy there is between different kinds of legal jobs and the discrepancy in pay as you described in your sort of viral video, that bimodal salary distribution where if you're stuck making the low wages, I mean, you could never get out of it, possibly. I mean,
Right.
the chances of you getting out of there and getting into big law are next to zero once you're stuck in the low paying jobs like I was.
Yeah.
So, but getting back, I mean, you did mention your uncle is an attorney. So did your uncle ever talk to you much about, why do you want to go to law school or offered to let you be an intern with him before you even went?
We talked about briefly, he's in a field that I really didn't have much interest in. So yeah, and I didn't have trouble getting internships. I mean, that was the easy part. It was just, and we didn't live close, so it wasn't like I could have like, stopped by his office and saw what he did. But yeah, I mean, that's another piece of advice I give people is know what it is. And that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why lawyers, almost more than any other profession, you always see the highest rates of depression, the highest rates of suicide among different professionals. Lawyers are always at or near the top. And I think it's because there's such a discrepancy between what you see on TV, what you think being a lawyer is, and what it is in real life. So that's another piece of advice I try to give people is really make sure you know what it is you're getting into. So if you can be a paralegal, I think that's like the best experience you can have before deciding to go to law school, because that's where you're really seeing what the work of being a lawyer is. And you can really make that decision from a place of knowledge and understanding. So I mean, that's do the opposite of everything that I did, and I think you'll be set.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree because, I had no idea what a normal day in the life of a lawyer could be like, or how it's different if you work for a big law firm
Right.
versus a tiny little law firm, or if you do criminal law versus, business law, family law, personal injury, whatever. There are so many different types of areas of law, and your quality of life could be very vastly different, as well as your pay, as well as the job market. So I guess, yeah, you guys should watch Eric's Why Law School is the Worst Decision You'll Ever Make, because he basically summarizes that in what, like 12 minutes or
Yeah,
so?
I try to
10
keep it relatively
minutes.
short. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to you think about other bad decisions. What are the things that as a parent you don't want your kids doing? You don't want your daughter growing up to be a stripper. Well, being a stripper on an hourly basis, she probably makes more money than a lawyer makes, and she has to sell herself for way fewer hours per night. What else? You don't want your kids getting into drugs. Well, there's a lot of new studies coming out that are showing certain types of drugs are actually really helpful for anxiety and depression. And if you go into law and you're miserable, you're going to be getting on drugs anyway. So there's a lot of, when you think of bad decisions you could be making, I think going to law school can actually rise to the top. And uh, it's just a matter of going into it with a knowledge of what it is you're getting yourself into. I mean, that's really, so many people make this decision in a way that is insane when you think about how this is going to impact your entire life, your entire career. And schools obviously have an incentive to build up their salary and employment numbers. And there's been all sorts of scandals as far as that goes. And the ABA has tried to standardize that kind of stuff, but it's still, like you said, there's that bimodal salary distribution. And when you look at it, you see a big spike at 190,000 a year, which is the big law. And then you see a big spike at 50,000 a year, which is the government jobs and the small law firms. And even that's a little skewed because the salary data that they're getting is much better reported at the big law firms, both because it's easier, everything's more centralized. The big law firms, it's easier to get that data. Law students or lawyers, law schools all want to report those high numbers. So it's much easier. You're getting all that data on the high end. On the lower end, it's you're not getting as many people reporting those lower end numbers. So I think the bimodal distribution is actually even higher than what it looks like on that chart that I share in my video. So that it can be a good decision if you're the right person. There was a kid in my law school his dad was the #1 personal injury lawyer in a major city. His brother worked for his dad, so he knew he had a job lined up after he went to school. He knew exactly what it was like to practice law. And for him going to law school, if that was what he wanted to do, it was a great decision. If you're, like I said, if you're just graduating college, you don't know what else to do, find something. If you like sports, go and work at the stadium selling popcorn and learn, meet people that way. Don't say, I don't know what else to do. And it's really easy for me to just make this decision to go to law school. I'll spend $200,000, but at least I'll know what I'm doing for 3 years. At least I'll have a bed. And then when I graduate, I'll figure it out. That's, you're kicking the can down the road. So I say, if you graduate college and you don't know what to do, work some shitty job in some area that you're interested in, and at least see if you can get your foot in the door doing something that you'll like. And then in 2 years, 3 years, if you still want to go to law school, now you've got this work experience under your belt. You're actually a better candidate for law school now when you have a couple years of experience under your belt, and you can go into it with your eyes open a little wider, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And plus, also, another thing about those like salary charts is that it doesn't even include all those people who couldn't even get jobs or couldn't pass the bar exam when they graduated from law school. So those people are not even counted in these like average salary for a lawyer thing. What about somebody that's just doing some temporary document review job for $20 an hour with no benefits? They're not going to be counted in that.
It's like the unemployment numbers. When you look at the unemployment rate, they don't count the people who've stopped looking for jobs, and it's very similar with the legal jobs. And yeah, those document review jobs are horrific. I actually did that for a very short period of time, but like you said, it's like $20-$25 an hour with no benefits, and you're literally just going through email after email after email all day long, just looking for a particular word. And I know a lot of people ended up having to do those kind of jobs for a while after graduation. Again, I don't know how prevalent that is today, but I know those jobs are still out there, and they're not fun.
Yeah, my sister did that when she couldn't find a job when she moved to a different state, and she just really hated it, and she did feel sorry for some of the people who were married with children that were stuck doing document review. So
again, that brings me back to my other point, which is, would you rather be doing a job like that for, again, $20-$25 an hour with no benefits, or doing something where you're not making great money, but at least you're doing something in a field that you're interested in somewhere where you think you can maybe move up, you can at least meet people. And that's you have to compare reality with reality, and not this dream of being in suits and making $1 million a year and arguing this case passionately in front of the judge and having the jury be on your side. People have this vision of what it is to be a lawyer, again, from TV and movies. That's just not reality for 99% of people, 99.99% of lawyers.
Yeah, because in your video, you did say something about how like people think being a lawyer makes you powerful. Well, how powerful are you going to feel when you're in like a 10 by 10 room with no windows and all you're doing is like looking at documents on the computer all day?
That people don't realize, like, if you're a litigator, if your job is to argue cases in a court, even those people are only in court for a small fraction of their time. Most of their time is in a room by themselves, the door closed, reviewing documents. So that's the bulk of any lawyer's job. And so you have to, if you know that going in, if you like doing that kind of thing, there are people who are very happy doing that, but you have to be honest with yourself and know what it is you like and don't like, and what it is you're able to do for 80-90 hours a week if you're at a big law firm.
Yeah. And so how did you wind up doing document review? Was this after you went to Duke?
No, this was after Notre Dame, before Duke, when, again, I was just trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do. I mean, I bounced around a couple different places. I was at a firm for a little while, just not knowing what I wanted to do, trying to figure out what I should have done after I graduated college. At 21, that's when I should have been just trying out different random jobs and seeing what it was I wanted to do. And again, I think a lot of people, I know I'm not alone, because I know people personally who've done similar things, which is you kick that can down the road and now you're 25, 26, trying to figure out what it is you want to do. And I just think you're so much better off figuring that out as early as you possibly can. We all want to be that kid who at 16 years old knows exactly what it is they want to do, and they pursue that path, and that's who they are for their life, and they're happy. But for the rest of us, I think probably for 90% of us, it actively takes work to figure out what it is you want to be doing. And the lazy choice is to say, I'm just going to go to school for even longer so that I can put off that choice.
Yeah. And with this question, it seems like we've already touched on
Yeah.
it about the median salary, because like I said, that doesn't include all the people that already quit the profession or never even got a job in the first place after law school. And
Right.
so,
And if that might be the median salary for all practicing lawyers. So not, the numbers we were talking about earlier were for recent graduates, that the big law firms are paying new graduates 190,000 a year, and the government jobs and the small firm jobs are paying new graduates on average 50,000 a year. So if you're including all lawyers at all levels of their career, that 127,000 number that he's listing down there, that might be accurate. But again, median's a weird number because there's really two different legal professions. There's the government and small firm profession, and there's the big law firm profession. And so there's not that many people who are actually making the median amount. It's just you're kind of combining the people on this far end and people on this far end.
what about this? What are you doing now? And
Uh,
did you ever take a bar exam?
Yeah, so I did take the bar exam. I mean, I did practice law, which is another weird thing. I mean, people who aren't in the legal profession don't realize that you go to law school for 3 years and you pay all this money, and then you have to take the bar exam, and you have to take a course that costs like $3,000 just to prepare for the bar exam. So law school after 3 years doesn't actually get you ready for the bar exam, which you need to practice law. It's a very, very odd system. But yeah, now I think the term that I use now is consultant, because that's kind of the term when you do a bunch of different things. You don't really have one word for what you do. So I do work with different clients. I'm not actively practicing law now, although I keep an active law license just to feel like I have something to show for all of that legal education. But I don't work. I use my legal background a little bit in some of the consulting work I do, but I don't work directly in practicing law. And then I do some comedy on the side, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to mention that you're doing comedy. Are you trying to be an actor also?
I do. One of the things that's great about being outside the legal profession is that now I have the freedom to kind of pursue some of the stuff that I really like doing. And I've always loved doing stand-up, and I was kind of doing a little bit of stand-up while I was still practicing, which I kind of had to do in secret. And there's a great Greg Giraldo is a great comedian who went to Harvard Law School, worked at Skadden, a big New York law firm. And his story was really interesting because he's a much more high achiever than me in all aspects of life, but it was very similar to kind of my story in that he was kind of sneaking around doing stand-up while he was practicing law, and ended up leaving Skadden after like a year to actually pursue stand-up full-time, and became a great stand-up before he died tragically. But my friend Matt Balker has a great book on Greg Giraldo, so I recommend reading that book. If you're in law, you're thinking about law, but kind of want to do something else, that's a really good book to read.
Well, so interesting. I've definitely heard of him. I didn't know he went to Skadden. That's
Yeah.
the firm that my ex-husband went to
Okay.
for 1 year.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people I went to school with, especially people who went the big law route. They practice for like 3 years, seems to be kind of the magic number, because I think that's probably about, if you have a lot of loans, it takes about 3 years of a big law salary to pay off those loans if you're smart about it. So many people I know went to big law for 3 years and then bolted for something else. So yeah, 1 year's short, but that's kind of what I did too. I practiced for about 1 year before I started trying to do other stuff.
So what happened to that guy? You said he met a tragic end.
Oh, yeah, he died of a drug overdose, unfortunately, and it's what happens to, unfortunately, to a lot of really brilliant comedians, brilliant artists in general. I think he had a lot of internal demons, but he got famous for doing the Comedy Central roasts, but he was also just a brilliant performer and just one of the funniest people, I think, in stand up in the early 2000s, especially. He was on Tough Crowd, which is one of my all time favorite shows, and there's a lot. I've found there's a lot of overlap between a lawyer's mind and a comedian's mind, just in the way they analyze the world and analyze language. And so there's a bunch of stories actually of people who were lawyers who then went into comedy. But Greg Giraldo's my favorite one.
Yeah, how interesting. I mean, I've definitely heard of him, but now that you're telling me more about him, I think I'll go and look him up.
I'll send. I'll say, I forget the name of Matt's book. I think it's called Greg Giraldo: A Comedian's Story, something like that. But he goes through Greg's entire life, and it's really comprehensive. He did a great job on it.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for telling us about him. Okay, so Tony asked if you've had any mentors or wise people that gave you advice or hooked you up with the work opportunity.
Yeah, I never had that one person who kind of guided me through everything, every step of the way. I know, a lot of people, especially a lot of business people, always talk about their mentor and how important it is to find that mentor. I never had that one person that kind of guided me through opportunities, but I've had people. I mean, my dad's the closest. My dad is someone I consult for every decision I make. I mean, he's not in this world. He's not in the legal world. So I think he doesn't have that direct perspective about specific steps I should make. But I run, all my decisions past him. But really, kind of each step of the way, I have found someone in each job I've had, each school. I think it is important to have that one person who understands you, especially if you're someone who doesn't kind of fit the normal narrative. It's very easy. Again, if you go into law school, you want to do big law and you're very focused, you can kind of just run through the path. It's laid out for you very clearly. If you're not that person, it's very, very important that you find someone who knows you for you and kind of has an idea, maybe has followed a similar path to you. If you can find that person and just pick their brain a little bit, I think that's huge.
Okay. Now, Valentino, I'm pretty sure you're the person that just started working for a bigger law firm and you're not very happy there. So he says that he's going to apply for a Duke Law School LLM. So what's your opinion on that?
I'll pray for you in a lot of ways. I mean, again, if you're not happy at a big law firm, why are you applying for this LLM? I mean, that's the question you have to ask yourself. Is it that you actually do want to practice law and you're in the wrong environment? Or are you not going to be happy practicing anywhere? That was something I needed to ask myself. Again, these are things I should have done. I'm an idiot. So whatever advice, the only real advice I can give you is here's the mistakes I made. So try not to make the same mistakes. So that's all I can do. If I were doing that decision again, I would really think very carefully about what it is I want out of this LLM. Are you just grasping at straws, just trying to find something to do? Or have you really thought through, have you looked at what are the career outcomes of people who are doing this LLM? What are the career outcomes for me if I do this LLM? Because that's one of the other things is schools will list off employers of their recent graduates, and they don't tell you what relationships they had with those employers beforehand. And so it might not be that the program actually gets you in touch with these employers. It might just be they already knew these employers and getting the degree helps them get that extra, that other foot in the door when they already had one in. So really look carefully at that decision. Really know, hey, yes, I do want to practice law, because this LLM is for people who want to practice law and simply want to do it at a startup or with entrepreneurs or with firms that work with startups. And if that's what you want to do, then maybe that degree makes sense. But if you're just trying to get out of big law, I think you're out of the frying pan into the fire if this is the degree you're going with.
Yeah. I always thought a LLM degree was for people that wanted to maybe try to be on the legal teaching market, or people who wanted to switch practice areas or couldn't get a good job with their JD.
Right.
So, I mean, did you feel like there were more job opportunities for you
No.
after you got the LLM?
No. I mean, the answer is very clearly no.
No.
Again, tax is very different. Tax, it's very, very common if you want to be a tax lawyer to get an LLM. That's the one area where most people get LLMs. And if you're an international lawyer, I think getting an LLM is actually the only way that you can practice in the United States without going through like a whole JD program. Again, don't take my full advice on anything. Look this up yourself, but that's kind of my understanding. But otherwise, like I don't think most of my professors didn't have LLMs. Again, if you're not in tax, there's really no reason to get an LLM. I don't think it opens more doors for you because, again, the legal recruiting system is very formalized, as is everything in the legal world. And the LLM's kind of outside of that system. So it doesn't really open up new doors for you. Again, unless you already had your foot in a door, that LLM might give you a little extra push. But I would not be doing an LLM if my goal was to find a new career path, find a new way in. I would go into it with, I said this for the JD, I think it's extra true with an LLM. Know why you're getting that LLM. Have a very, very clear idea of what this LLM is going to do for you in your career.
Okay. I just felt like I had to address this because, number one, I had no idea John Marshall shut down their LLM program. But I had this video from a couple of years ago about my former brother-in-law who got an LLM from John Marshall Law School. Then he wound up in federal prison after committing some civil conspiracies and money laundering, because he fell into financial difficulty trying to be a patent attorney and kept bouncing around from law firm to law firm, and he was off counsel, but he couldn't generate enough income. And then he tried to start his own law practice with some other people and couldn't make enough income. So the temptation was there to commit these financial crimes. So John Marshall LLM leads to federal prison.
I always say, I mean, one of the best reasons to go to law school is if you want to be a criminal and get away with it, because that's some of our best criminals have law degrees and are in the highest levels of our corporations and our government. So typically, I would say if you do want to be a criminal, go to law school. But I'm sorry to hear that maybe John Marshall isn't the best for that. But there are actually a lot of, I think, like, I don't know if that space law LLM is still up. I know there's like this huge boom in LLMs, and even there were a bunch of law schools that opened up. Again, it was this era like 2008 to 2014 where people, schools, universities were realizing that law was a really good way to make a bunch of money, opening up these new programs. And I know a bunch of them ended up shutting down because their students couldn't pass the bar exam, or, their LLM graduates couldn't get any kind of job. So there's a bit of a, retraction from that boom, but I know there's still a bunch out there that are completely useless.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have a call-in number. This is not like a real high-tech type of operation.
Yeah, I'd feel like I'm on a professional radio show if we had.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
But if you have any questions, a little slow, or you want to say something to Eric or me, please type in the comments in the chat box, and hopefully we'll get to your question. And I do see a ton of comments out here that I'm slowly getting to. Any law school students in the chat? Lil Slow agreed with something you said.
All right. I love you, Lil Slow.
Yeah. And he says something is stressful. Okay. Valentino says, I agree with you, Mr. Cervone. Big law is not peaches and cream. I work 20 hours. What? Really? Wow.
That if you're working on like a big deal or a big case, that's not unusual. That you're sleeping in your office. That's not unusual at all. I don't think, people don't do that long term, but certainly for a week or two at a time when you got something big coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, let me scroll through these comments because I would like to address everybody.
I love all these compliments. If you get more of those comments, put those up.
About how helpful you are.
How right I am and how smart I am, how handsome I am, anything like that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, okay. Oh, did you get any backlash from the law enthusiasts for making that video?
That's funny because I really was expecting that. Like, again, I made this video. I put so much time to all of my other videos. This one was just something I just kind of felt like saying. I wanted to get off my chest. I put it together quickly. I figure it was gonna, if it got any, I figured no one was gonna watch it, but if anyone watched it, it would be this controversial thing. I've gotten nothing but positive reactions from it. So I'm very surprised that there really hasn't been backlash. There really hasn't been anyone trying to defend the legal profession. Cause again, I'm not really saying anything super controversial, especially in that video. I was kind of just putting out facts of, hey, here's the employment numbers. Here's the stuff you should be considering. Here's the loan amounts that people are taking out that they're stuck with. So I would love to get some backlash and be able to defend myself a little bit, but I really haven't at this point. So yeah, if there's any lawyers out there who hate me and want to fight me, let's do it.
Okay. Well, maybe you can address some of the negative comments I've gotten, because I have multiple videos and live streams about, why some law schools are scams, or law school's not a good idea, or the truth about the legal profession and stuff. So I've probably gotten at least half a dozen, like, very negative, angry, rude comments from people. And they're usually, like, one person wrote, well, the average starting salary for Georgetown Law School graduates is $180,000 a year. So what happened to you? Like, it was my problem that I didn't come out making $180K.
Right.
I'm like, excuse me.
Well, again, I admit this up front that I wasn't a great student. I wasn't that focused. So if you want to think that it's just because I'm bitter, that's fine. But again, I think maybe 80% of people who are going to law school are going for similar reasons to me, which is that they're not super into it. They're not super focused. And So yeah, I mean, that's a valid criticism if you want to say, well, you washed out and that's why you're just bitter. I guess. I mean, I don't. I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm bitter. I don't feel bitterness. Again, I'm just trying to give people the facts. And again, like I said, the school that I went to, I was as good of an experience as I could have had. Uh, but yeah, I mean, if people are just gonna come at you with something like that, and again, so those $180,000 a year jobs, that's winning the lottery, I guess. But what are you really winning? You're winning, like that earlier commenter said, you're winning 20 hours a day in the office. You're winning reviewing documents to make sure commas are in the right place, and you're making a good paycheck while you're doing it. And again, if that's what you want, by all means, go for it. But there's something that comes along with those golden handcuffs that's not always great.
Yeah. And then, of course, some people also got mad when I talked about law school scams and, how some law schools aren't worth it and stuff. And people were saying, well, you're really condescending and elitist, and not everybody can go to Berkeley and Georgetown. And, online law school makes sense for me because I work and it costs so much less. And I'm going to get my JD and I can sit for the bar in California and stuff. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on
If
that?
you can get the job you want doing that, yeah, I'm not here to defend Georgetown or Berkeley or Notre Dame or Duke. I think it's absolutely the amount that they charge for tuition. It locks people into needing these high paying jobs that suck. So I'm not here to defend the elite schools whatsoever. I think it's horrific what they do, and the kind of misery that they put people through. And then they create these like weird complex things about, well, if you go into public interest, now we'll help you pay back your loans. And I think, well, why not just not charge such insane tuition so that people can just go right into public interest without having to have these crazy loan repayment programs? So yeah, if you know what job you want, and if you can get it by going to a cheaper school, by all means, that's much more preferable than going into huge amounts of debt to go to some big name brand school.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
again, it all depends on what you want out of it, and trying and going in with eyes open that these schools, that are unaccredited, you're not going to have the availability of jobs coming out that you would at the top schools. And again, those top jobs aren't all that they're cracked up. They're some of the worst jobs, so it's the decision you have to make for yourself. And my only goal is to try to make sure people have the complete information as they can have before they go into it.
didn't you just graduate from law school about 6 or 7 years ago?
I got my degree at Notre Dame 2013, which is almost a decade ago. Wow,
9 years ago.
I'm old.
Okay.
I'm old.
Okay. Do you
Well,
recall the ranking?
Notre Dame's always kind of been around like 18, 19, 20, I think. So it's like not really in that top tier, but it's just below that. And the Notre Dame, the Notre Dame name, the Notre Dame brand, it attracts. There's a lot of people because the school's in Indiana. It's the middle of nowhere, Indiana. So there's not that many people from Indiana. There's not that many people that stay in Indiana. A lot of people go to Chicago. There's a lot of people from California who go back to California. There's a lot of New York, a lot of Florida. So the school attracts people from and people go for the Catholic aspect of it too. That's what's unique about Notre Dame. But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'm
Well,
happy to. I don't know if they were trying to get at something with that question, but I'm happy to go more into that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're not really bitter about Notre Dame Law School, especially since you got a 50% scholarship, right? I mean,
I'm just not I think I'm not a bitter person in general. It's just like there was information that I wish I had before I went into it, and there's ways of thinking about it that I wish I had thought before going into it. And so that's the only thing I'm trying to do is try to give that to other people before they make that decision. To me, there's no bitterness.
okay, great. Well, you do seem like a very cheery, upbeat person. So I guess that helps if you want to be a comedian.
Right. It depends what kind of comic you want to be.
The comedy hides the sadness.
Exactly.
Okay, because I actually
laugh
did
to keep
some
from crying.
stand-up. Yeah. I tried to do some stand-up in the
Yeah.
past too. It's hard. Yeah. But okay, so this I find to be an interesting comment about lots of lawyers working evenings as adjunct professors at community colleges and low-tier undergrad colleges. They all say don't go to law school. They all look like recovering alcoholics. Sad. Yeah. But see, this shows you that most likely those lawyers had to do those jobs to make extra money. I mean, why would anyone want to have a full-time job and then have to dash to go drive over to a community college, and make an extra $2,000 or $300? It's probably because they were not making enough money, so they had to do that.
Well, there's a reason. Like when you do run into people who seem bitter about their career choices, if you keep running into people in the same field who all seem bitter, maybe that should tell you something. Maybe there's a reason why all of these people are saying don't go into this field, because I've seen what it is on the other side. And again, everyone's situation is unique. If you're the kind of person who always want to go to law school, if you know lawyers, if you know what the job's like, if you can go without getting too much debt, if you can get into a good school, there are people for whom law school is a good choice. But I think there's a huge percentage of people who are there in school who haven't thought through those things, who don't have all those things in place, and are just there for something to do. And that's the worst reason to go to law school. And the other thing I always hear is, people say, well, at least when you have a law degree, it opens up a lot of doors so you can go and do a lot of other things. And there's a causation there. I think the reason why there's a lot of people JDs doing things other than law is because they were so unhappy as lawyers that they kind of were forced to find something else. Going to law school prepares you to be a lawyer. It does not make it easier to find a job outside of law. And in fact, I think a lot of employers, if they see you were a lawyer and you're trying to do something else, that they kind of see you as failing in that field. And why would they want to pull you into theirs? So think about what it is you want out of your life and out of your career, and find the straightest path to that, or find the straightest path to figuring it out that doesn't involve going to a school that's irrelevant to what you actually like and paying $1,000 in tuition to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but it's kind of like when I was a struggling solo practitioner, I tried to be a career counselor at UNC Law School, and the lady wouldn't give me the job because I guess she thought that I was just going to run away as soon as my law practice became successful. And I was like, please give me this job. I need this job. But
was she wrong? Because our career counselors were there for 1 year every year, and they would rotate out every year. And so that's one of my biggest criticisms of law school, is that their career departments are not there. They do not help you find jobs. Again, if you're one of the top students and you want to go big law, you'll be able to go through that. You don't really, career services might help you like send out your resume to a particular place or line up your interviews, but you really don't need them. And if you aren't going to big law, if you are trying to do something different, career services doesn't really have any insight into alternate routes. And most of them are only there for a year or 2 years or 3 years until they go and find something else. Because usually there are people with JDs, at least in my experience, and they're kind of transitioning between something else. So was she wrong? That would you have left if your practice had taken off?
Probably. I mean,
Right.
but ultimately, thank God my practice did take off, but it took at least a year before I was making a good profit. But at that point in my life, I mean, I really would have taken that career counselor job if she had given me the position.
Right.
Yeah. But
and the person they hired instead of you probably just did the exact same thing. So
yeah, it's probably gone by now because it's been so many years.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so you're talking about the career counselors. Yeah, I'm kind of like a little bitter about the Georgetown Career Services, because since I wasn't at the top of the class, it just seemed like the career counselor didn't give a crap and was
they'll
just
review
like
your resume. That's what they'll tell you, oh, add this bullet point or subtract that. And that's really the most they'll do for you.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one career counselor who told me to stop putting up all these like Asian community activities that I was doing. She was like, yeah, if they just see your resume, you're doing all this Asian stuff, that doesn't look good. I was like, oh, okay. And then the other career counselor told me I should apply to like smaller firms out towards Baltimore because my grades weren't that good. And so I guess the smaller firms out in the burbs aren't as selective.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, that's brilliant. But that's all I got out of career counseling.
Right. And that's like, that's another sign of, if you're someone who, like, all of law is about fitting into a particular box. And so when you were in school, it was, don't show your Asian heritage off, because that's not what they want to see. It's all about putting yourself into whatever that current box is that they want to see. And so that field is very good for people who don't have a unique personality, don't have something in them that they want to show off that stands out, because your job is to kind of be this faceless drone representing your clients. And that's another thing I try to warn people about with law is you can't go and do stand-up comedy and be a practicing lawyer. It just doesn't work, because that's your job is to fit into that box. And I think, again, that sounds like horrific and racist that your career counselor would say something like that, but she probably wasn't wrong. I mean, you probably would have gotten rejected from jobs for standing out too much as this thing. And now things are changing where firms now have quotas for minorities. Again, it's not that they're now open-minded. It's just that that's kind of where the culture is. And so they're kind of doing what they think is the right thing to do. But if you're
Yeah.
at all unusual, you're not going to fit in very well, especially in these big firms.
Yeah. And also, on that note, just general advice, like you probably don't want to put on any like political types of activities that you've done or whatever, because you might offend somebody that's on the selection committee too and knock yourself out of
Right.
contention for
Right.
an
Your
interview.
job is to make yourself as bland as you possibly can be, which for me, there was no amount of money that would let me do that. Yeah. I couldn't, I tried to fit into those boxes and to erase all that stuff. And I was just like, what's the point of living with this? So I can drive a Porsche around. And it just wasn't. Again, you have to figure out what's for you and what you're willing to sacrifice, and what your priorities are.
Okay. Yeah. Let's try to answer some more questions. So
Sure.
we have so many questions here.
This is
And it's
great.
almost an hour
These are good
already.
questions.
Thank you, guys. Do companies consider LLM grads to hire with foreign J? Well, I would say maybe, but it really depends on your specialty. Because I just always typically assume that people with JDs from out of the country are usually at a disadvantage.
Yeah, we had someone who had a legal education in my LLM program from, I think he was from China, and he came to do the LLM so that he could practice in the United States. So it's hard to kind of give a generic answer to that question, but it depends on what you want to do and what your background is.
Okay, let me run through some of these comments here. See, University of Illinois removes John Marshall's name due to slavery. Okay, okay. I did not realize that. Okay, Lil Slow says, I work for a general practice law firm and it's been horrible. I'm the paralegal lawyer and receptionist. I make $72K and we do family, criminal, and personal injury. Yeah, that sounds about right. Like around where I am, that's actually kind of high in
Right.
terms of salary.
Again, and that's like, people don't realize that, like, how much you're working and how little you're making. This isn't the 1950s. Like, I think people still have this view of if you're a lawyer, then you're rich. That's just the way it is. And this is much more the reality if you're not at one of the big law firms in a major city.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think, Lil Slow, do you think you have any opportunity to move out of that firm and maybe get a better opportunity somewhere else? I guess it all depends on where you're located. Yeah, the owner has a quantity over quality model. Wow, we don't have a 401k or any good benefits. We literally take, oh my gosh, that's like the stereotypical.
Yeah, this is Better Call Saul, or yeah.
Gosh, sorry. Yeah.
That sounds miserable. And yeah, I mean, I hope you can find something else.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you can find something else. Just keep applying to like state government jobs or who knows what else is out there, depending on
Just
what
use
city.
your free time to start your own bit. Like, I think the way you get through bad jobs is you say, okay, I have X amount of hours in the day I'm not at my job. What can I do with those hours that would be most valuable? And for me, it's like, it's working on my own stuff that might be a business, even if it's eventually, but just to have that mindset of like, I need to have a plan for how I'm going to get out of this. And I need to use my free time to work towards that plan. So yeah, hopefully you're able to do that. Hopefully you have something else in mind that you can transition into eventually. That just sucks. I mean, I know what it's like to be in those kind of jobs.
State schools, I think most state schools are good, especially if you want to stay in the state, because at least they're cheaper
Right.
in terms of tuition.
Yeah, again, it's whatever your personal experience is, whatever it is you want to do. State schools can be great. If you want to stay in state, if you want to not go into debt, yeah, go to a state school. In a lot of ways, going to a state school is better than going, like, when you go to Notre Dame, if you're trying to practice in another city, they might take the state school graduate over the Notre Dame graduate because they know, hey, you're from here, you want to be here. You might have less competition when you're in school, so you might be able to get better grades, be higher ranked, not be in so much debt. Again, if that's what fits your situation, I say go for it. To me, it's about minimizing the debts, like the number one thing, because then at the very least, if you want to make that transition to doing something else, you're not bogged down by this monthly nut you have to pay off.
Yeah, I agree, because moving to North Carolina, it seemed like I would have had more of an advantage if I had gone to UNC Law
Right.
School as opposed to going to Georgetown.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were no alumni connections here.
Right.
Okay, Lil Slow said, I graduated from a tier 4 law school, cum laude. My only options were to public defender's office, state attorney's office, or a small law firm. Okay.
Yeah, and again, I think, like, the way I would love to know, Little Slow, going in, why you chose that school. If there was a way, if they sold you on some big dream that you'd be able to get out of it, or why was it that you chose that specific school? Because I think your outcome probably isn't very different from most of the people you graduated with, but I think people that you graduated with had a lot different view of what they would be able to get out of that school.
Mhm. Yeah, and those were pretty much my options since I was at the bottom half of my class at
Right.
Georgetown.
Well, that's even right. If you go to a really good school, that's the other thing. It's like you could go to a really good school, and if you're not at the top of your class, it still can be tough to find a decent job. That's again, people don't realize that outside of the legal world, I think it's almost irrelevant kind of what your grades are, where you graduate in your class. You know, when you graduate medical school, you're a doctor. I mean, you know, people want to see the results, the kind of work product you have. But in law school, it's all about where you go to school and where you finish in your class. I mean, that's what firms and most legal employers look at above anything else by far.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Kim Kardashian? I mean, good for her if she
Yeah.
can do it. She doesn't desperately need a job, so whatever. She just wants the
Well,
JD.
right. Yeah, she seems passionate about doing criminal justice reform. I mean, good for her. And she wants to do something valuable with her time. And I think she's doing an interesting thing. So in California, and I think a few other states, you can do this thing called reading law, which is how lawyers became lawyers for most of history. They apprenticed for lawyers, and they would do a little bit of coursework on the side. They weren't going to law school all day long for 3 years, paying all this tuition. It was getting practical experience, and it was doing your studies on your own. And there's only a few states where you can still do that now and be able to sit for the bar, and California is one. And so I think that's what Kim Kardashian is doing. If I'm not mistaken, she's not actually going to law school every day. She's doing this reading law approach. And I love that, because, you know, obviously she doesn't need to save the money, but for the average person who wants to be a lawyer, to be able to get practical experience instead of sitting in a class all day, and then to not have to pay the thousands in tuition to do that sitting in class all day. I just think it's such a smarter way of going about legal education. It's the way we did it. It's the way the UK did it, that so many places did it for so long, until universities realized, hey, we can make some money off of this. They partner with the ABA. Now the ABA requires that you go to law school to be able to sit for the bar. But no, I love that. I love that path. Absolutely. So hopefully she can kind of serve as a model for more people to become lawyers that way.
Yeah, well, she's also at a total advantage because it's not like she needs the money. She's
Right.
not going into debt. It'll
Right.
be great if she can actually, take the bar exam and pass it. But even if she doesn't, it's no big deal. She's not going to be broke with $300,000
Right.
of law school
Right.
debt or whatever. So speaking of that, Lil Slow says that his or her intern is from Catholic University. His loans are ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Catholic University is not worth that tuition that they charge now. It's so expensive, and it's not that well ranked, especially
Well,
amongst all the schools in DC.
right. There's not that much difference if you look at private schools. There's not that much of a range between tuition. I mean, these schools all charge roughly the same amount of tuition. And yeah, I think last I looked, the average debt of law students is somewhere between 110 and $170,000. And again, it's just like, that's insane if you're not making one of those big law salaries, which again, if that's your dream, great. But I think most people would be miserable in those kind of jobs.
Okay. So Jonathan wants to know, how old were you when you started law school?
So I did
22?
it. Yeah, it was right out of college. So it must have been, that sounds 22, because I kind of went everything straight through, which was,
Okay.
I was too young and too stupid to be making that kind of decision. And that's another one of my mistakes, was like, I was just not prepared to say, oh, I'm ready to be a lawyer when at 22, or when I graduated at 25. It would have been nice to have taken a couple years. Uh, Even if I did decide to go to law school eventually, I think taking a couple years to mature a little bit and really know that that's what I wanted, I would have probably done a lot better.
Okay. Yeah. So just to speed it up a little, I would say that those are terrible ideas, but I'm sure they're going to find some suckers that are happy to get into those law schools and pay them the big bucks and bring the student loan money.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize that they're opening up new schools, because, like I said, there was a big boom a couple years ago, and 5 or 6 schools ended up folding because people realized that they were basically just scams. And yeah, if you think we don't have enough lawyers in this country already, that we need more law schools, that's I already feel bad for the people who are paying tuition to go to these new ones.
Yeah. Okay. I think Eric already answered this, that, if you go in not even planning on practice, well, I mean, maybe if your family is rich and it
Right.
doesn't matter if you're spending 200 something thousand on law school, then go for it, but for most people, they have to take out loans.
Right.
So,
If you want to have this like credential that like makes people impressed, and right, money doesn't matter to you, then sure, go for it. But if you're going in knowing you don't want to practice law, again, unless you already have a job lined up, you have a very, very specific reason why you want to go to law school, it doesn't make sense. You're better off using that 3 years to get experience doing what it is you actually want to be doing.
okay. Valentino asks again, why are big law partners rude and pretentious? Do you know the answer, Eric?
Because they are rich, and they made it to the peak of what it was they wanted to do. I mean, that's they did all that shit work. They did the 80 to 90 hours, and now they feel like that they've won. And I think that's what you see from a lot of people who feel like, they rose to the top of the pack, and therefore now they had people who were rude and pretentious to them when they were coming up, and now they get the benefit of doing that.
Yeah, and plus at their firm, I guess they're used to bossing
Right.
people around and bossing around the secretaries
Right.
and paralegals and associates. So that's just
Everyone has their own little fiefdoms, and so when
yeah,
when you're the king of that fiefdom, that just becomes your identity. It's
yeah,
always weird to me. Like, I don't know. I never, if someone told me, oh, this person's really important, they do this, they do that, I'm like, all right, they're another person. I mean, I can run faster than them, so we're all good at our own thing.
Mhm. Okay, would it be worth it if the debt wasn't so high? Yeah, again, I think it depends, because for people who can't even find a job after they graduate, or can't pass a bar exam, or can't get a job that makes more than 55,000 a year, I'm sure those people feel like it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I didn't feel like going to my law school was worth it either, because I couldn't get past those like small law firm low paying jobs. I couldn't find anything better.
And worth it is, that's such a broad definition. It depends what you mean by worth it, because again, going in, let's assume you're going to graduate with zero debt, you're going to get a high paying big law job. If that's not actually what you're going to want to do for your career, if you're actually going to be miserable doing that kind of work, then no, it's still not worth it, because not you're wasting your limited amount of time on this earth helping AOL buy out Time Warner. I mean, if that's your dream, if some people like seeing the stuff they're working on being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and that's what gives them value in their lives, great. But again, you got to think through what it is. What am I going to be actually doing every day on a day-to-day basis? And is that what I want to use my time doing?
Okay, so Liz Edwards says, I got a full ride at a top 30 law school. Hey, that's great. Congratulations. Only have to take out around 90K for all 3 years. Do you think this is too much to take out, or is it worth it? I mean, it could be worth it. I mean, just depends on how it works out for you, because, like someone that's at the bottom of the class is going to have a much different experience than someone who's like in the top 10% of the class.
Yeah, again, I can't tell you what's worth and what isn't. It's so much of it depends on your situation and how you feel, what you feel your chances are of getting the kind of job you want, and how much knowledge you have of the everything we've been talking about, how much knowledge you have of the industry and of the kind of job you actually want and the career you want. Um, I feel like I can't give you specific advice on what's good or not. It's just put as much thought into it as you possibly can and get as much of information on it as you possibly can before you actually make that decision.
Yeah, but congratulations. I
Yeah,
mean,
congratulations.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good school that gives you a lot of opportunities, but $90,000 is still a lot of money. So, if you just, think about if you graduate and you say, I don't want to be a lawyer, and you still have this $90,000 hanging over your head, it makes it a lot harder to then go and find that other thing you want to do, because again, you can't take the same kind of risk as you could with $0 of debt.
Okay, so Carlos says 90K is not bad, but will still likely lead to a $1,500 a month payment. Can be a lot depending on starting salary. Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to give anybody a canned answer. It also depends on what if you have a current job now and what your career possibilities would be if you didn't go to law school. What are your other options?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the other, right, that's true. You have to think about, not only am I taking out $90,000 of debt, I'm also foregoing 3 years of income I could be earning. And that, I think that money you need to factor in as well, that people don't really think about.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be starting law school in the upcoming semester with full ride. Wow. Really, any job you do in life. Okay. Well, congratulations. I'm so glad that you got a full ride. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Great turnout. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should have Eric come back, because I feel like we still have about 20 more comments.
That's awesome. I love that people are enjoying it.
Yeah, this is great. But you want to take a moment to sell your YouTube channel,
Yes.
though, because, tell us more about what you're doing.
Sure. So my podcast is called Honest Defense with Eric Cervone. It's youtube.com/Eric Cervone. I'm on social media too. You can just find me. Twitter and Instagram are my favorites. Again, you just find me at Eric Cervone. My podcast, I talk to people who I'm interested in. So it could be lawyers. I've had a lot of First Amendment lawyers on. That's really my favorite area to talk about. I've had comedians on talking about comedy. I've had veterans on. I come from a military family, so I love talking to veterans. People have been injured in war. We just talking about war and kind of our foreign policy. It's really just anyone I'm interested in, and I can't believe the kind of people who are willing to talk to me. I've had some really, really fascinating people, and it's a lot of fun. It's very much like this. It's conversational. It's unedited. It's unfiltered, and to me, that's the beauty of the internet. That's the beauty of podcasting, is that you can have these things that feel like a real conversation, and people can tune in if they're interested, and if they're not, they skip it. But I've been doing the podcast almost 2 years now, and I have so much fun doing it. So yeah, check it out.
Cool. Well, how do you find your guests?
It really, a lot of it is, if I read a lot, so I've had a lot of authors on who are just have written books I'm fascinated in, and I just reach out to them, and authors are usually willing. They're excited that someone wants to actually talk to them about what it is they wrote the book on. And so that's it's funny how many people have said to me when I ask a question, they go, "Oh, you actually read the book." They're used to talking to interviewers who they get scheduled through some PR firm or something, and we're just asking them generic questions. So authors get really, really excited when you've actually read their book, which to me isn't a high barrier, because I only have on people I'm interested in having on. So I love reading the books that I read. I've had on comics who, just people that I know personally, or people that I'm fans of. So it's all sorts of different avenues. I just try to find people who I know are going to have something interesting and unique to talk about that you're not going to hear a million other places.
Yeah. I mean, that sounded really interesting. I saw some of your YouTube channel and stuff. And although I do kind of feel like maybe you should do a little bit more about law school and your legal career too, because you've gotten so many views. I think when your video first showed up on my YouTube homepage, I think you had only about 800 views on it, and now you have probably 5,000 or close to 5,000 views, and it's still going up.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I can never know which videos are going to hit a nerve, and that one in particular got a lot of popularity. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to turn myself into the law school guy. because that's just I'm doing other stuff that's interesting. And but yeah, if it's valuable, if there's like a particular video that people want to see me do that's relevant, that covers new ground, I'm happy to at least consider it. Because yeah, I mean that's the ultimate goal when you're creating content, is you want stuff that people want to watch and listen to. So yeah, it's crazy to me that it got that popular, and that you want to talk to me about it, because that's such a small piece of who I am and what I do. But yeah, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to get this kind of involvement of other people.
Exactly. So Juanita wants to know, she got a certificate in paralegal studies, having a really hard time getting work in the legal field. Any pointers?
I'm the last person to give you pointers on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, Judy, I'm gonna have to leave that to you. Do you have any advice?
I think you should just I mean, now thanks to email, it's not like you have to waste all your time and money printing out resume on nice paper and, spending money on postage and stuff. Just send out emails galore. Like most law firms do have a contact us part on their website. So just send out a nice, short, little polite email saying that, I'm a certified paralegal. I received my degree from such and such. And do you have any job openings available? That's what I would do. Just like throw your net out and
Yeah. Well, and
contact people.
I was gonna say, one piece of kind of general advice I have for anyone is find people's email addresses and just say, "Hey, can I take you out for coffee one morning just to hear about what it is you do?" And not even specifically asking them for a job, but just to make that connection. And again, so what I found with the podcast is people love talking about themselves and their work. And so, find a law firm that you think you might want to work at, email one of or two of their lawyers and just say, "Hey, I just got this degree in paralegal studies. I'm really interested in the area of law that you're in. Would you mind meeting me for coffee just to talk about what it is you do?" And just kind of slowly try to build that network. It's not going to lead immediately to a job probably, but you can start building that network of relevant people that are doing what it is you think you want to be doing.
Yeah, and totally, like, you could also look on LinkedIn or just search on Google, try to find lawyers that might have gone to the same college that you went to, so you have some sort of connection or an in. And, chances are likely those people might be more likely to be friendly and say, "Sure, let's go out for coffee," or "I'll talk to you on the phone," or whatever. So you just have to be very proactive. Yeah, and shout out to one of my subscribers who actually contacted me, and it turns out he's a student going to law school who lives really close to me, so we're actually meeting for coffee next
Oh,
week.
there
So
you go.
yeah, and I was
He
like,
took
"Hey,
my
this is
advice
cool."
before I even gave it.
Yeah, exactly. So you gotta be proactive,
Yeah.
obviously don't be annoying or whatever, be respectful of people's time, but, you just never know if somebody will be friendly or just give you a little bit of advice or know of a friend that is hiring. So,
Right. You have to be
yeah,
okay with rejection. I mean, you learn
yeah.
that in comedy, you learn that in your career, you learn that everywhere. Is like, even you might get 90% rejection, you might get 99% rejection, but especially when you're looking for a job, you only need one yes. So just be okay with hearing no over and over again. And again, like you said, don't be annoying to one particular person, one particular employer. Just accept the no and move on, and don't take it personally.
Okay. I think didn't you already cover this about how do you figure out what specialty to go to? I think it helps if you do internships or talk to other attorneys in that field,
Yeah,
right?
just get the broadest amount of experience you can. Take a bunch of different classes, talk to different lawyers in different fields, do different internships. Just kind of pursue the stuff you think you're interested in. What the advice I always get is cross off things and then just see what's left. So find the stuff you don't like doing, and then whatever's left, that gives you a good idea of where you should go. So try as many things as you can, get as much experience as you can. And again, a lot of this is just general advice for anything. It's not law specific. Because again, I'm not the one to be giving advice on the legal field or legal careers. So my advice is number one, I'm an idiot, and number two, get experience.
Okay. Oliver, I know of an LLM student from Columbia Law who got a big law associate position out of OCI, one in the entire LLM class of 300 plus people. Whoa. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad, Serena, you got that. Oh, and by the way, Jazz is Life. I'm assuming it's a man, but you won the law school book prize for my giveaway, and I'm still waiting to get your mailing address. So if you still want the book, please email me your mailing address to nclawyer at mail.com. So
You do so much fun stuff on your show. I gotta incorporate some of this stuff.
Like a giveaway?
Yeah,
You've got some
you're doing
stuff lying
giveaways.
around?
This is fun. What's the book?
Oh, it was a book called Failing Law Schools that was written by Professor Brian Tamanaha from Washington University Law School. And I think it's just this amazing book that I loved reading it. And I reached out to him, and he was willing to be a live stream show guest last year, which also got a lot of views. So I figured, well, now that I'm done reading this book, I'd like to pass it on to somebody else so they
Oh,
can
that's
read it.
cool. I love that.
So, yeah, that sounds pretty awful to be like at Columbia in the LLL program, and then just so many people still couldn't get jobs. That's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, Duke was very similar. I mean, I think a lot of people sign up thinking I'm gonna have the Duke name on my resume. A lot of people who came from lower ranked JD programs, so they're thinking, oh, I'm upgrading by going to Duke, and then you realize there wasn't even OCI. There was no kind of recruiting or interviewing on campus for LLMs, at least not in our program. And so a lot of people are like, oh, now what do I do? And they're kind of, again, back to square one, where I got to do the groundwork myself to figure out what I'm going to do when I graduate and get that job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like this question.
Okay, that's easy. What
Go ahead. You first. I want to hear your answer.
Gosh, well, I think it's hard. This is so long ago. I haven't even thought about this in ages. But I kind of like contracts with Professor Stephen Goldberg, who passed away quite a while ago, but he was a great professor. I also liked just the civil litigation or civil discovery classes I took that were taught by adjunct professors, because I felt like I learned a lot more from the adjunct professors than the regular tenured law professors.
What was your least favorite?
Oh, it had to be Con Law 2 with Tushnet. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to hear about my live stream anyway, but I hated his class and I got a bad grade in it. And I couldn't even understand anything he was saying. It just seemed like he was rambling nonstop and having like random thoughts of fancy, it was just a really weird class, and I hated his class.
So for me, my favorite professor was actually, his name was Robert Blakey, and he worked in, was it the Nixon administration? He was an old school guy. He helped develop the RICO statutes, and he was just this like the traditional scary law professor you imagine from the movies, and he would make students cry because he would keep drilling that Socratic method until you couldn't answer. And I love that because it just never scared me. It never intimidated me, but I loved seeing him intimidate other people. Like, I don't know why I got such joy out of the schadenfreude of seeing other people intimidated. So I love that because he was like the one old school professor I had that I wanted to see, because to me, it was fun to like have him drill you with questions and to try to see how far you could go before he tripped you up. But I had a First Amendment law class that I really, really loved. And that's still my favorite area of law. Just because you get to read cases about like pornography and people saying fuck the draft and sticking their middle fingers up to their teachers, and all that stuff was always fun to me. Like just people causing problems, nonviolent problems, and butting up against the law. That I just has always been my favorite area. So that I don't even remember who that professor was, but that's just always been I just had so much fun. And constitutional law in general. But my biggest disappointment with constitutional law is that like you never actually learn constitutional history in constitutional law. You don't learn about why we have a constitution. You don't learn about the Articles of Confederation and why those failed and why we decided to institute the Constitution and kind of the philosophy and the background behind it. You're learning just the case method the same way you are in any other course. So I was disappointed in constitutional law in general because that's my favorite area, but there's no philosophical underpinnings that I was expecting to get. It was very cursory in terms of how these cases fit together and how the founding fathers viewed particular issues and how the cases fit with the original intent, and all that stuff was the fun part. And we didn't really get into that. You kind of got other students would make fun of you if you asked a question related to that. My least favorite class was any of the super rules-based courses like tax law or civil procedure or evidence, where it's just you're just sitting there memorizing a bunch of rules. That just bored me to death. And those were a lot of people's favorite courses because they wanted that directness. They wanted to be able to know here's the answer. And like I said, like I enjoyed the intellectual pursuit of law school so much more than the actual the application of the law. So that's where I just did not fit in with most of my classmates.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're
That was a
getting
great
close.
question. That was a fun question.
Yeah. Okay. Brings back memories, huh?
It does.
Okay. So percentage of yes, I think 18% is less than the state bar passage rate. Yeah, that sounds bad to me.
Oh, 18% less.
Less than the state bar pass. Yeah, I think that's bad. I think you probably really want to stick to law schools where at least 80 or at least 85% of the graduates pass the state's bar.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's crazy to think you're spending 3 years and whatever the number is, $200,000 or so on school, and then it all comes down to this test that you have to study for independent of school. I wouldn't wanna take chances on, and a lot of it is these schools with the low bar passage rate. It has nothing to do with the school because, again, you're studying for the bar exam after you graduate school. You're taking a bar review course that's completely independent. I think some schools now do offer bar review courses, but for the most part, you're taking this course after you graduate. And so, like, to me, the bar passage rate of these schools is less about how well the school prepares you for the bar, because no school, Harvard and Yale, don't prepare you for the bar exam. No school really prepares you for the bar exam. That's just an indicator of the kind of students that they're admitting and whether they have the capacity to do what it takes to pass the bar exam. So that tells you something. The bar pass rate of these schools tells you something about who your classmates are going to be, and maybe indirectly something about what your career prospects are going to be. But it doesn't. I don't think it directly tells you about that school preparing you for the bar exam.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and like many people, I felt like I learned so much more from the Barbary classes right after
Right.
law school than I did during 3 years of law
Right.
school. There
Right.
was
Well,
so
because
much.
again, I mean, your law professors, another thing people don't realize, your law professors, at least for the most part, especially at the top schools, never practiced law or did so very, very briefly. They went from law school to a lot of them just do clerkships and then right into academia. So they're not preparing you to practice law. They're preparing you for legal academia, really. I mean, that's you're learning like hypotheticals. You're learning these case studies of older cases. You're not really learning the current law and how to apply that to a current issue. You're not learning about, you take a course on legal writing and research, which is the most useful course probably you'll take in law school. That's one class that you take. That's like one credit. But for the most part, yeah, you're not learning the practice of law or the current law from your law school courses.
Okay. And the electives, I would say pretty much everything by third year is an
Yeah.
elective. You can just choose whatever you want to take by third year.
Yeah, I don't know if things have changed and I wasn't that long ago I was in school, but for us, it was your first year's all set in stone. Every law school basically across the country takes the same courses. Then second year, you have like one or two or three maybe required courses. The rest are electives, and then third year is completely electives. And like that First Amendment course I took was an elective. That was probably my favorite. I took a course also in cyber law, which is all about the internet and applying law to the frontier of the internet. And that's an area that I do some work in now that I really, really enjoy is privacy online. And I had a good professor for that. So that was another favorite.
Yeah, I liked trial practice. I also took things like, Asian Americans in the law, African Americans in the law, just
Yeah.
general
And
practice.
right. And it's funny, you can tell like who had jobs lined up by third year because they could take all the fun 3L courses. So like, a lot of people took like sports law or entertainment law, even if they weren't going into that stuff, just because those are the fun courses people want to take. And then, the people who are really freaked out about finding a job, like had to take the serious courses so that they could show that off to the jobs they're applying to.
Okay. Well, just to wind things up, I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, was there a moment in your legal career where you finally just said, screw it, I'm not even going to try to apply for any lawyer jobs anymore. I'm through with this profession. I mean, because you still have your law license,
Right.
right? Like, did you ever think of like applying to other jobs or to nonprofits where you might be happier
Yeah,
as a lawyer?
you're right that it was like a very explicit decision I had to make, which was like for so long I felt like this is the path that I've chosen and I have to make myself fit into. And part of it was like this guilt of, my dad and my grandfather worked like manual labor jobs. They worked their asses off, they broke their backs, and I'm sitting here complaining about being in an air conditioned office in an ergonomic chair. Like, who am I so I was like, for a while, I was just like, bite the bullet, and work sucks, and that's just the way it is. And then, like, I guess I just kind of reached the point where I just thought, well, they didn't work this hard for me to be miserable. So maybe I really should try to find something I enjoy doing. And after a couple of legal jobs, I just was like, I'm not going to enjoy practicing law. This just isn't for me. And so it was relatively recently. I mean, I'm still in the middle of figuring it out, which is like, that's why it's weird for me to be on the show, like giving advice. Cause I'm still very much in the middle of figuring it out. I don't feel like I'm in any position to tell people what to do or to follow my path or anything like that. Cause I'm still very much figuring that out, but it was definitely an explicit decision to say, okay, I'm just going to, I'm going to just try to figure it out. I can't make myself fit into this box that I know I'm not going to fit in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what kind of job did your father have, and how did he and your mom feel when you said you weren't going to pursue being
They're
a lawyer?
right. They're both in the medical field, and they were. I mean, I'm very grateful for them. I'm very lucky to have the parents that I have. That they've always been very, you know, understanding of me and what I want to do. And they didn't. It wasn't like they pushed me into going to law school or anything like that. I mean, I think they thought the same way I thought, which was, well, I don't know what else I want to do, and that this is a decent career path, and so why not? So we were kind of on the same page as far as that went, but they were also very understanding when I was like, this just isn't what I want to do, and um, so I'm very very lucky. I know a lot of people are in a different situation where they're kind of feel like their parents are pushing them specifically into something they don't want to let their parents down, and I don't know, for those people, I think again, you have such a limited time on this earth. I mean, you don't know how much longer you're going to be here. You have to find a way to use that time in a way that you're going to be happy with and not spend it trying to please other people, because you're going to end up miserable. And again, I've seen this. I still have friends I graduate school with who are in the position where, well, my parents wanted me to go to law school and I spent all this money, and now I have a big house, and now I'm married and I have kids, and now I have to take care of them. And so I'm stuck in this career path because I have to pay for all this stuff. And it's not a happy place to be when you feel like you don't have options. And so that, to me, it's about doing what you can do to give yourself the most options, and then actively pursue figuring out which of those options is going to make you happy in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah, and that again brings us back to why people shouldn't take out a ton of debt, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to go to law school, because you need to have that freedom and ability. If you're miserable in your job, or you want to take a lower paying job to have a better quality of life, you're going to have more options when you don't have, say, 200 to $300,000 of debt gap, growing with interest
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that you're not going to pay off until maybe you're in your like late 40s or something.
I mean, there's stories of people's social security checks getting docked because they still have student loans. I mean, this is stuff
Oh,
that follows you throughout your whole life, and it's very difficult to discharge student loans in bankruptcy, unlike other loans. There's a lot of considerations that it's hard to think about when you're 17, you're first looking at college, or when you're 21 and you're thinking about law school. It's hard to think that long term about the decisions you're making, but you've got to force yourself to do. You've got to really think about. You can't think of 50-year-old you as being a different person. You have to think of yourself and just put yourself in that shoe, in the shoes that you're in, but 30 years in the future, and think, the decisions I'm making now, am I going to be happy with those in 30 years? It's so hard to do. And I don't know how to tell someone who's 18 or 21 or 22 and trying to think about this. I don't know how to help them think long term, because I know how I thought back then, and no one was really going to tell me otherwise. But that's, if I could force you to think about it, that I would, because these are the most important decisions you're going to make in your life.
correct. I remember being in my early 20s and not really understanding
Yeah.
about budgeting, or how different your life is going to be if you don't make a ton of money after law school. Yeah, the concept of money is just not there when you're that young. And
Right.
debt, what does it feel
Or
like to live with
Or
debt?
it's almost, for, I think, even especially for the people who choose law school, it's almost the opposite. You get these more type A's who all they are thinking about is money. They're just thinking about, how can I maximize my income? And so it's just like, okay, if I can't be a doctor, if I don't want to go into finance, okay, I'll go to law school. That's the way for me to maximize my income. And they're almost thinking too much about money, as opposed to, what is it I'm actually going to enjoy doing? And then how do I make money doing that? You got to kind of reverse the way you think about things. And so it's almost like, yeah, for most 21-year-olds, I'd say spend time thinking about money. But I think for most of the people we're talking to, it's almost think less about money and think more about your overall life satisfaction.
Okay, great. Well, it's over an hour and a half now, so I think we should wind things up. Thank you so much, Eric. Do you have any other closing remarks or little gems of wisdom that you haven't already shared with us? I think you've said a lot of very thought-provoking things.
Good. I wish I had something like some nice button on all of this, but no, I appreciate you having me on, Judy. I'm hopefully, I can give some decent advice. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. And yeah, you can find me again, youtube.com/Eric Cervone. You can find me Twitter and Instagram, Eric Cervone. And I post all the stuff I'm doing there, and I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Well, if you can hold on for a minute so I could say goodbye to you personally, and we'll say goodbye to all our amazing viewers out there, everybody who asked such nice, thought-provoking questions too. Thank you all for being here. And next Friday, we have another live stream with an attorney friend of mine who graduated from UVA Law School, and she's an immigration attorney with her own practice now. So thank you so much, Eric. And everybody is thanking you in the chat box. Yeah, thank you for being here also, Wanda and Oliver and everybody else out there. Okay, take care. Okay,
Bye.
stay on.
Thanks, everyone.
Don't leave. Okay.